Hello and welcome to my channel. For those of you that are new to my channel, I do a wide variety of art tutorials and demonstrations every week on a Thursday afternoon. And in today's tutorial we're going to be looking at drawing a bumblebee, and I'm going to be doing him using these Faber Castell pens. So I've chosen two sizes today. I've got the fine and the extra small, because really we want some nice fine lines for these wings, so we don't want it all to be in the same thickness of pen. So when it comes to doing his wings, we're going to be using a smaller pen for that. And I'm doing it on the mixed media pad, which is, let me just have a look, so this is the Daler Rowney and it's an A4. And the reason for using the mixed media is it's a nice smooth paper, but also at the end, if we do decide we want to put some colour on with watercolour or Inktense or any other water soluble paint or even acrylics, we can do that if we use the mixed media paper as opposed to just using an ordinary cartridge paper. So to begin with, we need to look at the shapes of the bumblebee, and really he's split into two. He's got this part which is his abdomen, and then he's got his head here, and he's actually, I think he's slightly bent like that. This is slightly going away from us, so his back end actually looks shorter than it probably is if he was completely stretched out. So we'll start by putting some pencil guidelines in, and we'll do him nice and big. So we'll get that shape there for the first part, and then his head is more of at an angle in this direction. And then you've got his eye or eyes section here. And then the other thing we need to put in really is his wings, which start about here. And we can refine these shapes with the pen. This is just some guidelines so that we know where we're positioning things. So look where things line up. It's quite difficult actually to see the back of this wing because it's so fine. But look where they are in relation to each other. So you're going from the tip of that wing to that one in a line there. And if you look at the tip of that wing there, it should be lining up with the back. So actually we've not got that coming across far enough. And perhaps we've not got this one long enough either, because if we look how far it comes out here, look at that shape there. So it needs to be out a little bit more. We didn't have the wings quite long enough there. So that's a good way to check your drawing, is to compare things, see where they line up. So look at the tip of that wing and you go across and it's sort of halfway up his head. So again, his head needs to come up a little bit more there. And you can start and alter things and measure as you go along. Don't worry too much about the legs at this point, just put in the basic shape of where they're at. Obviously they're in little segments. 1, 2, 3, and the same there, so it's going across. In fact, they're a little bit lower down than I've got them. They're quite long in comparison to the rest of the bee. So just take your time getting these pencil guidelines in and getting the measurements right. Look how long those, if you measure that leg there, the length of the pencil there, it's as long as it is from there to there. So I've actually perhaps not got that quite long enough. It needs to be coming a lot further down than that. And this little leg here is coming from behind somewhere. And then we've got one coming down here. And these are antennae at the front. And again, just look where things line up. So this end of this one lines up more or less with his knee there. So again, I didn't have it quite long enough. And we can refine all these shapes with the pen, but we get our guidelines in and we've got our measurements there. Okay, I'm not going to worry about doing the flower itself today. We're just going to look at drawing the actual bee. So I'm going to start now and put some ink pen on. Like I say, I'm using these Faber Castell ones because they are water fast and light fast. So if we do decide we want to put some colour on afterwards, we can go over the top with some colour without the pens moving around. So to set off with, I'm going to start, actually I might even start with the wings because they're sort of on top and they're more delicate, and then we can go around them with the other shapes. So I'm going to start with this shape here, Just look at where that's attached, and then look at the direction of the curve. So it curves up, and this is actually with the thicker pen, because if you look at the wing there, this underneath part is actually a little bit thicker than the lines on the top. And just look at where it's curving. And then I'll swap to my other pen for the top line. Because we don't want this looking too heavy. And just look at where it's going up and down. It's not an even shape, it's not a dead straight line. And this will look different again once we take out all those pencil lines. And I'm going to use this for both of the lines on the top one here. This is actually a more straight line. Then when you get to here, it sort of tapers off a little bit, and then we've got a nice round shape down, and you can hardly see that. And just leave that there, because we're going to be putting all that fluff of his head in front of that. But that's just giving us the outline of his wings. So I'll come in a moment and put all those little details in of all those beautiful shapes you can see here. And we'll use the thicker pen for some of these and the thinner pen for some of the other ones. So as far as his body and his head are concerned, I'm not going to draw it as a line. I'm going to draw it using flicks of the pen like that. So I'm just show you a few things as I'm going to do, and then I'll carry on and finish it and pop some music on for you. But we won't be filling in the head using a line like that. We're going to be doing it by putting the hairs in. And look at the way that they're moving, the direction that they're going. And we need that sort of distinction between the yellow and the black there. And it's very, very dark in some areas here. Just look at the way that they're going, and you've got one or two going off on their own really, really thickly. I'm just going over here to get some more shadow in, because there, where it meets the wing, it's very, very black and dark. So get those shadows in with the pen, because if we do put colour on, it's only going to be a little tiny wash of colour. You want that detail with the pen. And look there where the wing is sort of fixed to the body. Again, you've got some lines that are very, very dark. And just take your time. So you can carry on with that all the way around the body and the head with these nice little short strokes. You might want to swap pens here and there, especially down here where it's a lot finer, because that's more in the distance going away from us. So with the eye, that's an important shape, and if we look at that shape, if you carry on that line from the wing, it sort of goes down to the eye. So follow that, and if you look, I've got the eye too high up there. So alter your pencil guidelines and recheck them. And it's a peculiar shape because it's got the actual shape of the eye is like that, but then it's got this other sort of socket shape behind it where it's attached, and then some little hairs coming across and the leg coming across here. So again, you need to spend a little bit of time just looking at those shapes there. And I'm not sure what these are. There's two sort of yellow, I don't know what you call them really, oval shapes. I don't really know what they are. If you do know, you can let us know in the comments below. But just take your time, and again, look at how dark some of that area of the eye is. Then we need to get the legs in, and like I say, all that detail on the wings. So when you're doing the legs, just look very carefully at how they come out from the body. They're in three sections. So you've got one coming across here, you've got a little sort of joint there, and then they're coming out like this, again covered in hair. This one comes back, and then if we look at his foot, it's quite a peculiar shape. It's curving forward, but that's also in sort of sections, so it's got a little spur almost on the back of it. Just try and get some of that detail in there, and carry on and do that with all the legs. So I'll carry on now and do all that detail, and look carefully at where it's darker. If we look under here where the fur's coming across, where the head part is separated, because we're sort of in three parts here. If you think about this eye section, the rest of the head, and then the back here, and look carefully at where the legs are attached, because it's very dark in here as well, so you can't quite see exactly where they're attached. Okay, so I'll carry on and fill that all in, and I'll come back to you when we've finished.
I was. I am supposed to be the one you can trust. I feel so useless 'cause I let you down. I hope there's some way I can make it alright, 'cause I know that you deserve much more than this. If you give me one more chance, I swear I'll try my best to always be there. And I want you to know that I'm lost without you. I'm not without you. I hope I can show what you mean to me, 'cause I don't know what to do if you go. Ooh, I just don't know what to do if you go. I've been so selfish and made you believe that you're not good enough, but you're all I need. I take you places that you've never been. I would give you the world if you let me try again. Yeah, just give me one more chance. I swear I'll try my best to always be there. And I want you to know that I'm lost without you. I'm not without you. I hope I can show what you mean to me, 'cause I don't know what to do if you go. Ooh, I just don't know what to do if you go. Yeah, just give me one more chance. I swear I'll try my best to always be there. And I want you to know that I'm lost without you. I'm not without you. I hope I can show what you mean to me, 'cause I don't know what to do if you go. I just don't know what to do if you go.
I'm going to call that enough for the drawing at the moment. If you wanted to, you could put extra level of detail in. You could go even darker in some places. Don't be afraid to go nice and dark in areas to make the other areas stand out. So it makes this wing stand out a little bit by going very dark around it. When you're doing these wings, don't forget this one's much nearer to you. So this one's a little bit out of focus from the camera actually on here, but it's also further away, so you're not going to see as much detail in that one, and it's going to be much finer. So bear these things in mind as you're drawing them. You might want to put more detail in the legs here. There's lots of little stripes and shapes and hairs and all sorts, so you could spend an awful long time doing a very, very detailed drawing of this. But what I'm going to do now is pop some colour on. I'm just going to use the Inktense, Derwent Inktense blocks, and just a tiny touch of colour. I'm not going to overdo it at all. When you're drawing the wings, don't forget that they're transparent, and this one has got the body behind it so you can see through, whereas this one hasn't got anything behind it at all. So unless you're doing a background, you want to leave that one as it is. Because we've got a lot of detail in that drawing, we don't really need to add too much colour. It's just to brighten it up a little bit, but we don't want to detract from the drawing. So I'm going to use a nice bright yellow. And if we actually look at the bee, it's not really just yellow, it's actually more of an orangey yellow, so I might add a little touch of this orange into that as well. That's perhaps too much, so get more of the yellow. And plenty of water in there as well. We don't want it to be too opaque. So I might actually pop a little bit more water in. Okay, and for the second colour, we're just going to use 2 colours. And it's not as black as it may seem. I'll just turn this around actually so you can see what I'm doing. It's got a nice Derwent black here, but it's more of a grey. And I'm going to add some of that dark brown into that as well, to make it more of a warmer colour than just black on its own. And again, I'm going to add a little bit more water. We don't want it to be too opaque. We want the pen lines to show through. So a little bit more water. And of course you can always test that before you go and put it on your finished painting. Okay, so now you want to be quite careful that you just put the yellow where it is and you don't overlap these stripes and get the stripes wrong, the wrong way around. So if we look, there was just this tiny touch here, some that we can see through the wing, and I'm just going to break that up a little bit. Don't put it on too solidly around there, but we can see it through the wing, so it does want to be there. And then it comes down and round. We've got little bits of yellow on the leg, and this is all just going to brighten it up and make it look a bit more lively by adding these bits on the legs. Just smudge there, never mind. So I've got a nice point on this brush, makes it nice and easy to do, both putting plenty of colour on and finer detail. Again, we've got a little bits of yellow where the joints are. We've also got this yellow oval down here and one here, which again, like I said earlier, I'm not entirely sure. Now I can see what they are. They are actually the pollen of the plant. They're not part of the bee. So what I will do with those is make them now that looks like they're rays coming out of his eyes, so I'm going to change that altogether. So let's just get rid of some of that colour. So this is what not to do. So I'd totally got the drawing wrong there, because I was trying to just draw the bee on his own, and I've got 2 of those little pollen things from the flower. So what I'm going to do is wet this paper around these legs a little bit here and add a tiny touch of a nice sagey green, quite a delicate green. I don't want anything too bright to detract from the bee, so that we can tell there's a plant there. And then when that's dried in a minute, I'm going to put a stem up to that pollen. So let's leave that to dry. You could go all the way around with that colour, it's quite a nice colour, but I'll just soften the edges and let that fade away. And the thing about Derwent Inktense is it dries quite quickly, but also it dries and you can paint on top of it without disturbing the layers underneath. So you can layer it up. So I'll leave that to dry and then we'll come back and make more of that pollen. So that's a mistake on my part that you won't do when you come to do your drawing, because you'll realise that that's pollen and not part of the bee. You were probably thinking I was mad, wondering why he got these 2 yellow eye looking things on him. Okay, so that's probably enough for the yellow there. And again, if you wanted, you could come on top with another layer once it's dry with the yellow, because if we look at it, we've got 2 different shades going on. But try and keep it simple. And the black. Try and follow the direction of those hairs, even though you're not really drawing with the paint. You've already got the drawing there. Just try and continue that flick of the brush. And we're going to need some of that underneath the wing as well. So it's not quite as dark under the wing as it is on top. I'm going to just put a little bit of water on there before I start with that. There are one or two areas where it's catching the light more, where you might want to keep it white or lift some out. But it doesn't want to be the same sort of texture as the parts where the hair is. Again, just keep going in the same direction that those hairs are going. It's not easy to tell at this part here where the legs are joining on which direction each of these hairs are going actually. And we want some of that black on the legs themselves as well. Keep it loose. Don't be too tight with your application of the paint. And when I mean tight in your arm and your wrist, as if you're drawing. Just keep it nice and loose. You've got the drawing there already. You're just applying a little bit of colour. And that eye, of course, is all quite black. Leave some white there on the eye. And of course that's still wet, so we need to hold back from painting that actually at the moment. So this perhaps should turn into a lesson of what not to do. So just leave that area for now, and we need to do this area here, don't we? The back. You'll notice I used the finer pen for this area because it is much further away. So actually if you wanted that to be a little bit lighter, that might help give that impression of it being further back. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to pop some of this, I'll just move this along so you can see hopefully, pop some of this colour into here, the tiny touch extra water and a little bit more of the brown. Because if you look at those wings, they're more of a brown than a black, and I think it's the way that the light's catching on them actually. And then I'm just going to wet this area here, and the same up here with a damp brush, not a sopping wet brush, just a little tiny touch. And then we'll pop some colour into these. We don't want to cover the whole thing. And I'm actually going to manipulate that around with a brush a little bit as well, with a damp brush. And leave some white there. You might want to do the background there and have that colour coming through the wing, which you could do. Perhaps not left enough white. Okay, so I'm going to let this bit dry and then we're going to come back and do some more layers. Okay, now that's about dry, we're going to do something with this pollen. So I'm going to get that same green colour, make it a little bit thicker, and just put one or two lines of plant in, as if we've got some plant going up there to those pollen areas, so that they're not just floating on their own. Try and make some of these shapes a little bit varied, but don't overdo it and overpaint it. And then if you look at them, they're actually more yellow. I'm going to use a different yellow. I'll just show you. That was the yellow I used before. This is more of a limey yellow, just to make them a different colour to the rest of the bee. And it makes it more obvious that that's part of the plant, especially if I put some extra ones on some of these other stems. That sort of rescued that a little bit. So I'm going to go back to the dark colour now, and in just one or two areas where it's a little bit darker, I'm going to go over the top. It seems to be more dark where it meets the yellow there and around here. but I don't want to cover up that pen work, so that's probably about enough for that. I'm going to give a couple more layers to this and just leave it where it's lightest and put an extra layer over where it's a little bit darker. And that's going to help with the shape of the bee as well. Get that round shape. If you don't want it to be as bright as this, or you don't want your colours to overtake your pen quite so much, you might want to use much more delicate layers of watercolour. If you like working in watercolour, that's ideal, just to pop some colour over the top using that. And while that's still wet, I'm just going to add a little touch more yellow to brighten it up some more. So that we've got a few different shades of that yellow, because we did add some orange to it earlier on. Okay, so overall I'm not too happy with this plant and grass and things that I've got here, but that's entirely my own fault for not looking properly at what these were in the first place. So I will link this reference photograph down below if you want to have a go at doing this. Let me know how you get on in the comments below. Hopefully you won't make the same mistakes that I made, but you might actually want to do the plant, and you might want to, because his feet are obviously resting on the plant as well, so you might want to put that in. Don't feel you've got to do it in white. You could make it pink or red or any other colour just to brighten the whole thing up if you wanted to. And of course you could put a background in, and it doesn't have to be a green background of a leaf or whatever. It could be sky behind. So there's all sorts of ways. Once you've done the initial drawing of the bee, there's all sorts of ways you can make your own picture by adding a different background and a different flower, etc. So I hope you found that useful and you enjoy your own painting and drawing, and I'll be back again with you next week. Thanks for watching, and bye for now.